The home theater receiver market is hotter than ever, with each brand out to make the best, financially approachable but still high-end sounding do-everything AVR. Marantz got things rolling last year with their new cinema line, so let's see if Pioneer and their new elite receiver, the VSX-LX805, has what it takes to take the lead. The LX805 is Pioneer's flagship AVR, and this is one of Premium Audio's, that's Pioneer's new parent company. This is their first receiver that they've had a true hand in designing. The 805 is an 11.4 channel Dolby Atmos, DTS:X, IMAX enhanced, and Auro 3D enabled AVR, though Auro 3D is slated to come via a firmware update sometime in June. According to Pioneer, the 805 produces 150 watts per channel with 2 channels driven. The 805 is a Class AB receiver featuring a new symmetric amplifier design. If you need more power than the advertised 150 watts, the Pioneer has full preamp outs, 2 of which are balanced, as well as 4 subwoofer outs, though they are grouped, meaning there are only 2 discrete outputs. Other notable specs you will find on the 805 include 8K, 4K 120 support with 7 HDMI inputs and 3 HDMI outs. It supports all of the latest HDR codecs, which include Dolby Vision and HDR10+, as well as the various surround sound codecs I already mentioned. There are gaming features like VRR and ALLM as well. Legacy video connections and signals can even be upscaled to 8K depending on your settings. The 805 has put a premium on 2-channel music playback featuring 2 32-bit ESS Pro DACs, as well as a pair of balanced audio inputs and a moving magnet phono preamp. Throw in support for wireless and Wi-Fi enabled music services like Spotify, Tidal, Roon, as well as smart home features like Google Home and Alexa, and it's easy to see that Pioneer's new 805 has come really ready to play in 2023. To test the new Pioneer, we use the Polk R700s and the R600s, Klipsch's 8000F Mark IIs, MoFi Source Point 8s, and last but not least, the KEF R11 Metas. Now, all were supported by our Klipsch in-ceiling speakers for surround and Atmos channels, with both Klipsch RP1000 and SPL100 subwoofers also getting a turn. The Pioneer's THX certified power drove all of the speakers well, with no real signs of strain or distortion, including the more power-hungry 4-ohm Polk R700s and R11 Metas. Now, as for my favorite pairings, those came from the R700 and R11s, but when using Pioneer as a preamp connected to our Emotiva XPA amplifier for that little bit of extra grunt. Also worth noting that unlike the Marantz separates we just reviewed, when watching Dolby Atmos content at full tilt, the Pioneer got warm, but it never got too hot to handle. The well-built Pioneer 805 seems aimed at a decidedly more upscale and discerning customer compared to the other elite receivers in the line. The chassis is stout with terrific bracing and support. It's also noticeably heavier than our RZ50, no doubt a result of the new amplifier section. And while it may look a bit like the lesser 505, the 805's build quality belongs in the conversation with costlier Marantz, Denon, and Yamaha AVRs. The receiver's unconventional binding post layout is separated into 2 groups, right and left, rather than the more common way of pairing similar speakers together. I can't say that I've seen this layout before, but I suspect it might have something to do with the 805's new symmetrical amplifier design. The Pioneer has 2 different auto room correction procedures as standard: the brand's own multi-channel acoustic calibration system, or MCACC for short, and DIRAC Live Premium. Now, I'm happy to say that the full version of DIRAC is included with the 805's purchase price, something I can't say for Marantz and Denon. Now, you can upgrade and get DIRAC's new bass control single or multi-sub software for an additional $349 or $499 respectively. After experimenting with both MCACC and DIRAC procedures, I prefer DIRAC. For one, its laptop-based user interface is class-leading, and 2, it is quicker and more consistent with its results. I don't recall MCACC being as slow or troublesome in the past, but the results, at least in our room, they weren't the best. I found it to be more thin-sounding and disjointed, with many of the speaker settings just being inaccurate. DIRAC, at least using its factory curves and settings, produced dramatically better results and is the auto room EQ solution I would recommend you use if you buy the 805. Manually configuring the 805 is easy enough, though for more advanced controls like, say, manual PEQ, you have to go through the MCACC dashboard, which I found frustrating at times. If you prefer to do things, the old-fashioned way, Yamaha, Marantz, Anthem, and even Sony are sometimes better options. Again, I recommend using DIRAC, which is the more user-friendly option, even when manually adjusting your speaker's sound. Now, if I asked you to hit pause and comment on how you would expect the Pioneer to sound, I'm going to go out on a limb and say you would probably get it wrong, just like I did. Because if you said something along the lines of like an Onkyo or other Pioneer receivers, think again. To me, the 805 doesn't sound like any Pioneer that I can recall. It actually sounds more like a Yamaha. Now, I'm not saying they're the same, but if I were to poll a dozen of you, I'm guessing that most wouldn't call Pioneer ruthlessly neutral or void of character. And at least when it comes to the new 805, the sound is exactly that. Now, we all know that an amplifier's only job is to amplify the incoming signal, so a lack of color or change in tone is actually a really good thing. But let's not kid ourselves. A lot of us like a little bit of character in our electronics, so if this sounds like you, the 805 may not be to your liking. From the bass on up to the treble, the Pioneer possessed ample control over our speaker's various drivers, but its sound, it never really stood out. For example, the 805 had better linearity and detail retrieval throughout the bass compared to our RZ50, but it lacked the grip and snap of the Sony 7000ES, making it feel, more subdued by comparison. Now, to me, the Sony is a little bit more dynamically interesting and definitely has some character, of course, depending on your settings, but the Pioneer sounded flat. I'm not saying this to pick on the Pioneer. This is a more neutral presentation, and it will likely appeal to a lot of people. So, like Kristi always says, you gotta know what kind of listener you are. Mid-range and treble-leaning instruments and sound effects had good body, good detail, and sonically fell right in line with the rest of the Pioneer's response, with no added boost or brightness to be heard anywhere. Unless, of course, you engage the receiver's dialogue settings, in which case the entire amp signature skewed more treble forward. I found the Pioneer's intelligibility to be rather good, but Kristi sure complained about it, but I'm going to save that for her part of the review. Be it music or movies, the Pioneer proved to be very even keel, and with well-dampened bass, solid neutrality across the frequency range, good detail retrieval, and an airy treble that never became brittle or fatiguing, even at extreme volumes. I liked the 805's two-channel performance a lot with respect to its soundstage, and I felt that the definition and separation between instruments helped the 805 sound more like a good stereo integrated than a receiver. The layering present when listening to tracks like The Noose or Fool Outta You was terrific, though I would have preferred just more snap and attack down low. Surround sound effects and placements were no better or worse than what I've experienced from Marantz or Denon, but it didn't quite rise to the level of Sony's new ES receivers with their 360-degree spatial mapping tech. Now, dynamically, the 805 is more well-dampened and controlled rather than explosive. I appreciate this approach with respect to music, but for movies, certain scenes felt like they needed just a little bit more of a running start. Both the plane crash sequence in Knowing and the rig explosion in Deepwater Horizon required me to turn things up more than usual in order to fully experience the thrills I just know exist in those sequences. As for the rest, I found the Pioneer's video switching to be good, definitely as good as what you're going to get with Marantz, including the costlier AV10, and just miles better than what we experienced with the Anthem 740. Scaling is also good, or on par with the competition. Gaming on the 805, trouble-free, enabling me to game in 4K 120 in HDR on our PS5 with zero issues, and fast-paced games like Overwatch 2 or Gran Turismo were buttery smooth with no additional lag that I could detect. Bluetooth connectivity worked great, and was easy to carry out even on my aging iPhone. Connecting to the Pioneer control app, also good. Now, the app isn't quite as robust as what you're going to get from Denon and Marantz, but it is better than what you're going to find with Sony. Lastly, the built-in phono preamp was also a really nice touch, and it worked well enough that I didn't feel our Cambridge turntable was being robbed of any of its, sonic capability when relying on the Pioneer versus the Cambridge's own built-in preamp. Let's just get right to it. Compared to the similarly priced Sony 7000ES, the Pioneer is the more accurate receiver in this head-to-head. Even so, the Sony is, for me, the more captivating and dynamic receiver. The 7000ES may not be as neutral or as absolutely well-mannered as the 805, but when it's time to watch a movie, the Sony is far more engrossing. Spatially, I'm not sure it can be beat, especially at this price point, or if you have a less than traditional surround sound layout. Compared to the Marantz Cinema 50, the Marantz has a tone, one that can come across as a little fuller than the Pioneer. In the mid-range and treble, these two may be more similar than different, and both the 50 and the 805 are helped when you turn things up, at least dynamically and with respect to surround sound presence. I would definitely cross-shop the 805 against the 50 because at least with the Pioneer, you're getting DIRAC as standard, plus a few more channels, making the Cinema 50's, lower asking price not quite the deal it may appear to be at first glance. As for one of our old favorites, the Onkyo RZ50, it remains one of the best receivers for the money even in 2023. The 805 definitely doesn't destroy or embarrass the Onkyo. I will admit, the 805's new amplifier section is more mature and refined, but despite those improvements, I'm not sure it added up to a better overall experience for me. Sonically, I actually prefer the RZ50's older amplifier design, even if that design is flawed in comparison. Regardless, I had every intention of retiring our RZ50 in favor of the 805, but I got to say, I don't know if I need to. As for the RZ70, we still haven't heard it yet, so we're in a sort of wait-and-see mode until then. So to wrap it up, I need you to know that I am not hating on Pioneer's new 805. It is among the least offensive or objectionable receivers that we have reviewed so far this year. The sound is just very neutral, linear, and controlled. All of its features, they work out of the box, and 98% of its promised performance is available now and not 6 months from now, something I applaud Pioneer for, and I think you should too. This receiver is incredibly well built with functionality that should provide for years of worry-free use. But like I say at the end of every video, the only person who has to like the sound of your system is you. And for me, while I 100% appreciate the 805 and its performance, it just never really jived with me. But it might be the perfect solution for you. So that's it for me and Pioneer's new Elite 805 receiver. But before we go, I promised you, KRISTI'S was going to weigh in on her thoughts. So what do you say?
Here we go.
Here we go.
Okay. Listen, historically, I have really enjoyed Onkyo, Pioneer, Integra brands. They're all basically...
Yeah, a little bit interchangeable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I dig their sound.
Yeah.
Again, historically.
Oh, okay.
But as Randy Jackson would say, it's going to be a no for me, dog.
All right.
I say that with all the love in my heart.
Yeah.
Premium audio company.
Yeah.
Listen, one of the things that I really want to focus on is what you brought up in your portion of the review, and that was clarity and intelligibility. For me, you guys know, if you watch the channel, this is something that I sometimes really struggle with.
Yeah.
And with the 805, I had one of the worst times understanding actor dialogue with this particular receiver than, just about anything I can recall in the past. It didn't matter what speaker it was.
True.
Even with speakers that I know to be very clear and that I have responded very well to, for example, the KEF R11 Metas, they are among the clearest or most intelligible speaker in that regard for me. Yeah. And even with those,
you were struggling.
I was just like, what? No, I annoyed the heck out of Andrew with this while this one was connected. It was only when the dialogue button was engaged.
The enhancements.
Yes, those enhancements that that clarity improved for me. But otherwise, it just sounded muffled.
Okay.
Now, so I appreciate that there is the dialogue enhancement.
Yes. Because
it did help tremendously, but it also, and I think you kind of alluded to this, it also made everything else sound elevated too. So, I don't know. Like you, I'm just a little bit stumped at this one. It's very well built.
Yeah.
And for a receiver, I think it has a very elegant design.
It's classic, but yeah.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah.
But if the products that first came out from, let's say, Onkyo or Pioneer, were a part of that and that roadmap that were already in place prior to Premium Audio's acquisition of Pioneer and maybe Onkyo, then perhaps there's just going to be a new and different sound
going forward. It's
and,
possible.
Yeah, and expectations will just need to be readjusted.
Yeah. I agree. I agree. This is definitely a sound that is not similar in a lot of respects to RZ50 or Pioneer's 305 or 505. So if you already own those products and you're thinking the 805 is just going to be like a bigger version of that, it is different. It is different. I am on the fence, not on the fence, but I'm on the side where I don't think it's a bad thing, but my personal preferences and biases definitely don't put it in the lead. You know what I mean? Now, I do need to point out for some of you, 3 things that you need to know for background as far as some of the comments that Kristi just made. Number 1, we relied solely on DIRAC's house curves or their automatic settings. Now, obviously, you can go in on your laptop and make whatever adjustments you want. So if you want to spike that treble, you want to spike that mid-range manually, you can. And it's actually pretty fun and it is easy to do. We rely on the auto settings because I have a sense that that is what the vast majority of people are going to do, because the promise of auto room correction is for it to be automatic. So we are relaying the information to you based on DIRAC's house curve, or MCACC's house curve for that matter, although I don't recommend MCACC. Second, the dialogue enhancement does skew the upper mid-range in treble, and it does skew it even with 1 click. Now, you can adjust it +1, +2, +3, and stuff like that. Even +1, it skews it to a notable, measurable degree. I don't recommend leaving it on for music because it also cuts bass. So if you accidentally had it on because you're watching a sitcom, which isn't supposed to be bombastic, and it's more about the dialogue, as Kristi said, remember that it's on, and remember to turn it off when listening to music, because you may go to turn on your favorite rock or R&B or rap album and go, where's the beef? Dialogue enhancement, cut it off. So just be aware of that. And those are just the 2 things that I wanted to clarify that I felt needed a little bit more context. I did find intelligibility got better with dialogue enhancement, but I also did not appreciate or like the skew that it did to the treble. I especially didn't like the skew when paired with, say, the source point 8s, which we'll get to in that review coming up.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I at least when it comes to sound, I prefer the Anthem, the Sony, the Onkyo, the Marantz sound over this and over the Denon.
Okay.
I would say this reminds me a little bit more of Denon's sound, which is
interesting.
Which is a little bit more, for me, it's always been kind of more laid back.
Yeah.
A little bit more neutral.
It's funny you mentioned that, because when listening in stereo, one of the amplifier comparisons I made in my head, which is why there's the line in the script about how it sounded a little bit more like a good integrated, the separation and feeling in stereo in the Pioneer's more direct modes reminded me of the A110 from Denon.
Yeah, which
you weren't the biggest fan
on.
of. Yeah, I have to admit, this was a fun review on a lot of levels, but it was also very interesting because of the fact that I try never to go into anything with the preconceived idea, but inevitably you do this long enough, you've been around enough of these products, you kind of go in with like, you expect tradition, and this is something different. And for that, maybe I should actually be more excited. I guess I'm still just grappling with the fact that it felt like such a departure. And like you said, maybe over time, expectations will change. How much time will we need to kind of put aside the pioneer of old and embrace the pioneer of new? I don't know. These are really interesting questions now as someone that has frequented the brand for 20, 30 years. I mean, we have vintage Pioneer stuff. I've had Pioneer throughout my career. And this is, I have to say, something unique. And I'm intrigued. Although it was unexpected.
This is, I will applaud them for that, because it's a risk. They are putting their things out there, and it is a bit of a risk.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to see how other people respond to it.
I am too, and I just thought of something while you were talking.
Because I said something incredible.
You said something so remarkable that I almost fell off my chair.
Oh, goodness.
Almost.
Well, thank God.
No, because it is a departure and this is something new that the premium audio group designers had a hand in, I kind of feel like maybe this should anchor or start the elite line. And that if the lesser, older designs or previous designs, like the 305, the 505 and stuff, maybe those should lose the elite badge. Because to me, this amplifier section, this sound, is going to appeal to neutral leaning, reference seeking, objectivity based listeners, if that makes any sense. And to that, maybe it deserves the elite moniker, and maybe Pioneer needs a different moniker for something that may fall lower in the line. I don't know. I literally just thought about this as you're watching.
Well, it would be a way to separate.
It would.
The old from the new.
Yeah.
You know, we'll see. I mean, who knows?
We'll see. We're not in charge.
It's one receiver. Maybe the next one's going to sound different. I don't know. But kudos for making a very competitive receiver in 2023. And I have to say, I applaud you that it's fully functional with the exception of one firmware update. It's fully functional out of the box for the same price as what everyone else is charging while you wait. So that's pretty good. That's pretty cool. So anything else? All right. So that's it, guys. That is now our review of Pioneer's new Elite 805 AV receiver. The only question I have is, what do you think? What do you think? Do you like this? Do you not like it? Have you heard it? Have you gone to a store? Have you heard it? Do you physically own it? Please, let's get the conversation going down below. Be respectful, but yes, let's get the conversation going down below. If you like this video, please do give it a thumbs up, like, and subscribe. Go ahead, ring that bell so that you're notified when new videos come out. If you use any of the links that Kristi left for you down below, know that that's a great way that you've continued to show your support for this channel and the work that we both do here. And both of us thank you all very, very much for doing that. Follow me on Instagram at Recovering Audiophile, and that's it for us today. So remember, the only person who has to like the sound of your system is you. So happy listening, everybody. I appreciate you all watching so very, very much. And we will see you on the next video. Bye.